Welcome to the IBJ Podcast. We here again today with Kalia, my other co-host, Morgan, and then we have another special guest today, Miss Carol Mitchell with us. We got another good one for y'all, but as usual, we're going to start off with the mission statement. So the IBJ mission statement, the purpose of the Institute of Black Justice is to relentlessly pursue equity and justice for all. The IBJ mission is threefold: to be an advocate for fairness and equity, and to be an accelerator of the justice system's transformation, and to be an accomplice to credible social justice influencers and the communities they serve. Okay, to give you all a little overview about what we're going to get into today. Welcome everybody. It's 2024. Happy New Year's. We made it here. I'm very proud of everybody. I hope you guys got your New Year's resolutions and everything of that nature. This is our first Black Robe Podcast of 2024. Our topic today is one of many that if not millions of individuals have been covering since the verdict was read to the jury in the trial over the death of Manuel Ellis, where the jury found all three officers not guilty of all charges. Before we continue, I would love for Ms. Carol to introduce herself as usual and just tell us a little bit about herself. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Hello, Isaiah, Kalia, and Morgan. I'm always excited when I get to hang out with young people. It's better than a popsicle on a hot summer day. It is so refreshing and satisfying to sit with you. My name is Carol Mitchell, and I am the founder of the Institute for Black Justice. And this beautiful podcast is going just as it was designed. It's turning into an intergenerational dialogue between brilliant young adults like the three of you and old school, new school talking to old school about social justice issues and raising awareness, letting folks take a look into how we think and how we feel about current social issues that matter to us. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Manuel Ellis case and all of the developments that have happened since the announcement of the verdict.
Very much, Ms. Carol. Kalia, could you tell us a little bit about our first topic we'll be getting into today?
Hello, everybody. So tonight, our first topic that we'll be going over is how the trial marks a landmark case in Washington as the first in state to be tried under a 5-year-old police accountability law that made it easier to prosecute officers who use deadly force. The final 3 Tacoma police officers under internal investigation in the March 2020 death of Manuel Ellis agreed to resign after more than 3.5 years on paid leave, and the department largely cleared them of their wrongdoings under policies at this time. I kind of want to go over that and break it down, but I'm pretty sure we'll get into that so you guys can understand that topic a bit more.
To continue what Kalia is saying, we also know that they were paid $500,000 to leave and not just resign. The city released copies of the voluntary separation agreements with the officers Tuesday. This was after they have been paid their regular salary plus retirement benefits, sick leave during the whole time the trial was going on. We also learned the acting U.S. Attorney, Tessa Gorman's office, said in an email that they are conducting an independent review of the state's case concerning Manuel Ellis's death. If that review reveals violations of federal criminal statutes, the Justice Department will take appropriate action. The FBI declined to comment about any involvement in the investigation.
Mm-hmm. This is so rich, right? It has so many layers and levels to it because on the one hand, it put, I think it's Initiative 904, the Police Accountability Initiative, that was on trial because it tested the extent to which a jury would actually uphold what the law has said that we need to be doing. And as you could see, frankly, it didn't work. And so I don't know what's missing out of that new law, but it didn't work for Manny Ellis and his family. Clearly, it did not work. There's the whole internal investigation, and something that isn't widely being discussed in the news, but the role of the union, the police union, Local 6, I think it is, in using their political muscle and the collective bargaining agreement to broker a deal that basically, from a Black community perspective, reads like this. If you want to be paid for 4 years for doing not a damn thing for the city of Tacoma and collect your retirement benefits and accrue your sick leave and your vacation and get to resign as if you had never done anything wrong, all after killing somebody. It was a homicide, y'all. And even though the jury didn't believe what 2 medical examiners testified to, Manny Ellis died that day, and they both agreed it was a homicide. But because you have a collective bargaining agreement in place, all of them got to keep their jobs until they were found not guilty. And now all of them are getting paid $500,000 each. Go off and go to work for some other police department. And probably in a year or so, I wouldn't be surprised if the whole record of all of this leaves their police file. So nobody will be able to even know they were ever accused of it, unless they do some Google searching, which, I'm sure they might. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many levels of it. The city manager used the language that the separation agreements were responsible, constructive, and that it was a constructive path forward for our community and the Tacoma Police Department. But I have to wonder what community she's referring to. Because I'm for sure, as a Black woman, I don't feel like it's constructive and responsible for you to pay these folks $500,000 each after you have paid them for 4 years to do nothing, after one of them had already left town and got himself another job out of state, and you still paying him. How the hell is that responsible and constructive? But you cannot afford to put people living in tents on Yakima Avenue into shelter out of 18-degree weather. And frankly, the county can't even call a bad weather day so that the shelters will open. We can't get that done, but we can give these folks over $1 million to go away. How is that constructive and responsible? You ain't talking about my community, Elizabeth. And word on the street is you might be getting your walking papers. And from this sister, goodbye and good riddance, because you have not represented this part of the city of Tacoma, this part of the community very well at all. That's my point of view. That's my perspective. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one to gossip. You have heard it directly from me. I don't gossip.
Mm-hmm. Well, even just hearing your perspective on that, it kind of just gets into this question that we had for you. That somebody asked, do you think the officers who were paid $500,000 to leave the force was an ethical move on Pierce County? County.
I'm gonna, y'all excuse my language tonight, because I know y'all are young and innocent.
I know what's coming.
Put your hands over your ears. It was move is what it was. It was the way that the city avoided the big fight. Because if they had fired these boys, as they could have, which they claimed the IA investigation only showed that one of them, was wrong when he told Manny to shut the F up, when Manny said, I can't breathe. So that's the only wrongdoing that happened, is somebody said, shut the F up. But everything else they did, using a lateral chokehold, hog tying him, putting a knee in his back. You telling me all that was cool?
Right.
I think it was a move because it got the city out of having to fight a lawsuit from each one of those three for getting fired, even though they were planning to leave anyway. One of them already had another job. Why are you paying him to leave? He left 3 years ago. Why are you paying him? He been left. So no, I don't think it was ethical. I think it was expedient. That's the word I would use. It was the quickest way to get the city out of another series of lawsuits and union complaints, because really, they don't have the balls to fight it. I'm speaking plain tonight, y'all.
I hear you. I hear you.
I hope y'all ready for this podcast, because I ain't playing around tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
They don't have the balls to fight Local 6 or to go up against these 3 officers in a wrongful termination case, right? But they'll put off the Manny Ellis family for 4 years. That lawsuit's been pending 4 years, right? They'll push that out and push that out and push that out for 4 years. So they'll fight the victim's family tooth and nail to the finish line. But they wouldn't fight these boys, even after they murdered somebody.
And since we're speaking on...
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Even after a homicide. Let me get it right.
I got another question. What comments did the city provide after the trial, if you remember any?
You know, I purposely put myself out of hearing reach of anything that they had to say, because what I wanted to know is what was the result of the internal affairs investigation. I just told you what Elizabeth Pauley had to say, right? Nobody's going to really say anything official about. I think the mayor came out and said, we'll let y'all know what we gonna do in 14 days. We'll let y'all know, because anything they say when there's a pending civil case against them by Ellis's family, anything they say could be used against them. So they're not going to come out and say nothing about that trial. Everybody had their spit mask on after the trial. Everybody did at the city. They weren't going to say anything. The other thing that's what they did say or do is put a muzzle on our community police advisory committee. There's a whole committee of citizens who we thought were going to have some oversight responsibilities for the Tacoma Police Department. And we spent a ton of money going through a process of designing what that would look like, only to have the city manager, who might have her walking papers, and I hope so, only to have her pull it back and say, no, here's what we gonna do. Instead of giving you all, CPAC, Community Police Advisory Committee, instead of giving you the power to have oversight of these kind of decisions about police, what we're gonna do is we're gonna hire a $22 an hour liaison to help y'all out and to keep an eye on what you're talking about in your little executive sessions and report back to me. That's what we're gonna do. And here's what else we'll do. We'll take your desire for more power into a study session at some point in the future, and we'll let you know whether or not we're gonna let you have any power. And don't point to Seattle. Just because Seattle got power don't mean you're gonna get it, Tacoma. So the CPAC has basically been, what do you call it when you take the backbone out of a chicken? I don't know. There's a word for it.
No, I was going to say gutting, but it's not gutting the chicken. It's something else.
They gutted it. They skinned it. They took the backbone
Oh,
out,
Lord.
you know. And why did they do that? Because if the CPAC had had the authority and the oversight of this mess, you would have seen an entirely different result for these three officers. They did not want the CPAC to have any authority to be able to look into the investigation and hold these officers accountable to a community standard. Chief Moore did have some comments. Let me see if I can find his comments. What does he say? The policies have changed, y'all. Well, that's nice. So what he's basically saying is it's Ramsdale's fault. It's the prior chief, you know, because those policies that found these three hadn't done anything wrong were here before I got here. So look, what could I do? My hands were tied. It's a 2020 policy. You're asking me to deal with this behavior in 2023. I'm stuck with the 2020 policy, but guess what? I've changed it all now. But it wasn't retroactive to March 3rd, 2020, when they did what they did. So I'm stuck. Ain't nothing I can do. But we look forward to showing you how these new policies are going to work in the future. As soon as somebody else is murdered, we'll put them to the test and let you know how they work. I'm sorry. Can you tell I'm fired up about it?
Yes, I can. You all good. I'm gonna ask a.
I'm not one to gossip.
Right.
Yeah, tell it like it is. Tell it like it is.
Ooh. It's a lot going on, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
We need you all, young voting adults, to get these people out of office.
Mm-hmm.
People who are running, making these choices and these decisions do not need to be leading in the city of Tacoma. They do not represent the interests of Black folk that live in Tacoma.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not the majority. I think that's one thing we forget.
They are not.
They're really not. It's about who's voting. And I think that's one of the biggest things we've talked about and we've seen with the Tacoma for All effort. Like when we actually, the people with the mass majority numbers vote, things happen. Also, one question I have for you: if CPAC, the thing that was built to have actual proper oversight over the case, was able to do their job or did their job, how do you see this case playing out in that hypothetical future or a future that could be if we were actually able, to implement that?
Well, more than likely, they would have been deeply involved in that investigative process, or at least been probably made aware, because it's been, they don't have like 4 different internal investigations. You know that, right? It's been multiple internal investigations. Pierce County had one, Tacoma had one, the State Patrol had one, the AG's office had one, and now TPD's having their own internal. It's just all of these different policing bodies, who are supposed to be doing an investigation into the use of force. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. I'm married to your sister, you married to my brother. So you're asking police to police. It's the community standard that should drive how police officers are judged, not a police standard. And I think what the CPAC does is bring the community mindset and the community lens to these cases. And we didn't get that because our city manager decided that CPAC needed to wait until a study session before they could have any power. And the study session, we've been waiting about 6 months for her to schedule the study session that would have brought that forward. Shame on you, sister.
I guess I'll jump into my next question. What do you think the United States Department could have done or done more of when reopening the investigation against the 3 officers?
Oh, you're talking about the U.S. Attorney, the United States Attorney.
Yeah, okay.
For the department, I'm assuming because they are looking at whether or not there's a federal crime that's been committed.
Mhm.
And it may be a civil rights violation. It could be something else that they're going to take the facts of that case,
Mhm.
which in Pierce County was looked at under police accountability and other state laws. But in the federal law looks at it, they may see facts that suggest a violation of some federal rule. And if they find enough, they have to use the same kind of standards that they use for any other kind of federal indictment. There has to be enough facts to support it. And if there are, these boys will be back in front of a different court, this time with the federal jury.
Mhm.
Yep, so it ain't over till it's over. The other thing they could be looking at, so let's take the 3 individual officers out of the equation.
Mhm.
There's 2 police departments that are on the hook. My old stomping grounds, Pierce County, is on the hook, and Tacoma Police Department. So somebody said they both ought to be under consent decrees. And consent decrees basically means that the government's going to be looking into their dirty laundry, watching everything they do, paying close attention to how they treat folks, looking at their internal investigative processes, checking and rechecking how they handle these police-involved shootings.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yes, as they should. But that's what a consent decree would do. And usually it lasts 3 to 5 years or longer.
Mhm.
But it happens when you cannot trust the local police department to properly police itself. Pierce County had no business investigating Manuel Ellis's death because they had an officer on the scene too. It was a conflict of interest, which is why they hurry up and settled that lawsuit with the Ellis family for $4 million. They hurry up and wrote that check because they knew they were wrong. But maybe there was a civil rights investigation there. Maybe there was a crime that they committed. And so U.S. Attorney will be looking at whether or not potentially Pierce County or Tacoma Police Department or the 3 officers individually acting under what they call color of state law, basically violating the state law or the federal law, I'm sorry, whether there's a reason to bring another case against them. And my hat is off
Mhm.
to Monet Johnson, I think is her new last name, Manny Ellis's sister, who took her little self up to that U.S. attorney, to that federal courthouse, and stood out there in front of that building with her bullhorn, screaming at the top of her lungs, "You all need to review this case and give my brother justice." She screamed. She just stood out there in the cold on the street
Wow.
corner, yelling at the building.
Wow.
Because sometimes you have to take matters into your
Mhm.
own hands, right?
Wow.
Proud
Wow.
of you, Monet.
Mhm.
Take yourself on to law school, girl. You know you
As a
need to.
lawyer, what have you noticed about the trial that stood out to you the most?
Well,
I know it's a lot.
a lot of people, I'll keep it very short. A lot of
Okay.
people probably saw my Facebook posting. And look, if you ain't following me
Mhm.
and you ain't my friend, that's okay with me. It's all right. If you ain't my friend after those posts, hey, you doing me a favor if you just unfollow. You know what I'm saying? Because
I agree.
I don't know who
I
900
agree.
of y'all is anyway.
Exactly.
I only know about 100 of y'all. The other 900, hey, I wouldn't recognize you in the grocery store.
Exactly. That
So
part.
do what you got to do, because First of all, there was secondary trauma
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because when we see a young Black man walking from a getting some donuts,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get home, who dies en route in that short little stroll between the 7-Eleven and his house, dies, and three people
Mm-hmm.
could have made a single different decision, take that mask off his face, he would have still been alive. Now, I think with respect to the trial, we had a judge that had already made up his mind which side he was on, and that was very clear to us. Judge, we're very disturbed by, let me just say, the demeanor, uh, arguing with the prosecuting attorney's team, the AG's team, allowing evidence in that most decent lawyers and judges would not expect would have been allowed in about Manny and his history. They put Manny on trial. That's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
They put Manny on trial, and he was found guilty of being a Black man with some mental health issues and an addiction. That's what he was found guilty of, which is why the jury did not believe the eyewitness statements over what these three officers said. Because Manny was the one on trial, y'all. And he was found guilty. Guilty of being Black in Tacoma. That's what he was guilty of. Guilty of having untreated mental health conditions. Guilty of trying to self-medicate some of the pain that arises from trying to make a living in an environment that is hostile to your very existence. If y'all don't think that's stressful, yeah, people self-medicate. And so here's what they said. Well, because you already had an enlarged heart and you might have been self-medicating yourself that night, it's your fault that you did. It's not their fault, it's your fault. That's how the verdict landed. It was Manny's fault that he was killed that night, not theirs.
See, I appreciate everything you're saying because the amount of character evidence that was allowed to go into that case was absolutely insane. Because why are we talking about him as a person when there is a video of him being murdered? We all seen it. People there to testify on what happened or not. We basically are present as well within that situation to an extent and saw exactly what happened. But of course, the only way to get around something is to make it about something else. So not about the situation, about himself. One big point I wanted to point out is like this is not like the $500,000. It's crazy how Black murder and death still to this day is translating to like white generational wealth,
Oh,
long-term white generational wealth.
oh,
Because
say that again.
$500,000 Black murder and death is continually to this day still translating to white generational wealth. That $500,000 is $500,000. They can still, and it's not to not be a police officer anymore. It's to just go somewhere else and do it. So it's not even like they haven't lost anything. They've only been rewarded for this situation. But to people, but to the regular person, to anybody who pays attention to what has happened, they would know that it's wrong. But there's still a narrative that's like, okay, we got them out of here. There's no issue anymore. But it's like you've just shown that this is not just something that won't be penalized. It will be rewarded long term.
Mm-hmm.
How am I supposed to be safer here as a Black person in Tacoma, knowing that the same thing could happen to me, my father, my brother, my mother, anybody else, and it will be rewarded long term? Not only that, my family will become vilified. I also will have people slashing my tires and giving me death threats. I will continually have to go scream at buildings for my dead sibling. Like
I
this is,
know it.
and that's the whole situation as well. Like there's a severe dehumanization of Manny Ellis and his family, for them and the grief that they're going through. To even sit there and look at a video where it's very obvious what happened, and then to go through 4 years of this turmoil, I can only imagine what his sister felt out there, screaming for him. So shout out to her, and then prayers out to the family. But I appreciate
Yes.
you've been telling us, Miss Carol. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest, let the people know about, or just break it down? You're very educated on this, and I'm learning a lot as I'm listening to you. So I would love to hear your voices a couple more times before we close it out.
I think it's important for people to know that the letters with the dots behind my name, I wasn't born with them. I worked my little off to get those credentials. I paid my own way through school. I did not have inherited wealth. And I had 5 brothers, 3 of whom died early because guess what? They were Manny Ellis. They had previous histories of incarceration. They had mental health conditions. They had substance use conditions. So when Manny was brought in to that morgue where I was working, I did not just see Manny. I saw my own brothers, my own flesh and blood. It was a metaphor for every family like mine that had lost a child early with those conditions. It's a common theme in Black and brown families. There's no life that is worth so little that when a person says, I can't breathe, you can't, and you have the capacity to save their life by making one move. Take the mask off, take your knee out of their back, just a simple move of your body could have saved that person's life. But you being in control was more important than them living. That's a sad commentary. We have to do something about police accountability. The Community Police Advisory Commission needs to have oversight authority. I-940 needs to be stronger than what it already is. The force investigation teams should not be constructed of anybody that has any working relationship with the police department being investigated. And I know that may cause some expense, but oh well, that's what we need for fairness. I also hope the U.S. Attorney looks very carefully at the facts of the case for civil rights violations, if not criminal violations. And that, hey, I'm cool if there's a consent decree that comes down for Pierce County Sheriff's Department, because, the person they have at the helm, he needs some help. And for the Tacoma Police Department, I think they both need oversight. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it. Unfollow me on Facebook if you don't like it. Help me clean out my friend group, because I'm going to keep saying this in every venue I can say it in, as loud as my little voice can say it. It's true justice, no exception.
No exceptions.
Thank you so much for everything you're telling everybody. I mean, I feel like this is one of our best episodes so far, and it's because we're being very real and very honest about the situation at hand, what has happened, and what will continue to happen if we don't have change and enact, and react to the situation accordingly.
Wondering how you two feel as young adults that have to live and walk along these streets. How are you feeling about this? And what do we need to do for you to make sure that you all feel well and feel safe?
I would just say, for me, just hearing, the outcome of this trial in general, it just puts a lot of things in perspective. Like, anytime, because recently I never shared this with a lot of people, but I was involved in a shooting at my last apartment, and he was white, but at this point he's trying to plead guilty, or he's trying to plead innocent for the situation that happened. I'm like, how can you plead innocent? How do you even have how can you say I didn't do that? Like, or this wasn't what it was. And it's clearly what happened. And it's like, I feel like it's also because we're African American that he just feels like he has that right to lives in danger like that and think he could plead innocent. I guess that's crazy. And even just hearing this, it just puts it into perspective.
Well, we
So
need to
it kind
show
of
up.
triggered me a little bit.
You need to make sure we know when you're in court with that person, so we can show up with our IBJ t-shirts on.
I hear you.
And look, I'll put some water on this silk press and blow my hair out and put my black leather jacket on and put in my hair. Come on up in there.
Because I'm like, it can't go any other way. That's probably what the family of Manuel Ellis was thinking. Like, this can't go any other way than right. But look how this ended out. It's just crazy. So
look, and judges are elected, so pay close attention to who the judges are making these rulings, and you make sure they don't get reelected. That's what we can do. You are not going to get reelected in Pierce County acting like you acted in that trial. That's something. But you know what? You got to be registered to vote to make that happen.
Right.
And for my part, Ms. Carol, to answer your question, I just want systemic change, but it needs to be deeper than just minute changes. We need real big institutional changes, similar to what you're saying about this oversight. It needs to be there. And not just that, I don't need you to go retrain somebody who is inherently racist toward a group of people. I need a better person in place who doesn't have those same biases to that extent and can sit here and treat me as a citizen when I get stopped. I have a family full of very big, strong Black men, women in my family. We are big people. Like, they're not finna, you know what I'm saying? I got to be careful where I go because I understand I'm not going to be met with, hey, how you doing? It's like, I'm a threat. And especially the bigger and the darker skin my family members get, the more scary it is to these police officers. And the only way we change that is by true systemic changes. It's really real. So I think for myself, that's really what I want, because similar to you, Ms. Carol, I've lost some people in my life very close to me from the same conditions as Manny and to police violence. It happens consistently. And so I'm more so concerned about the safety of myself, like, and the safety of my family, which is so crazy because when we think about community change and when we think about the police department, we should be thinking in a lens of how do we thrive, not how do we survive. Survival should be the base layer for anybody. We should already have that guaranteed. But we don't even get to think about how we thrive as a community. We have to think about how can we still be here breathing. That's a big difference. And so the privilege that a lot of people have in this community to just think about, oh, how can we change the police so we can be happier when we talk to them, like the white people or anybody else who has more fair skin or more points of privilege within that situation. It's like, nah, when we backtrack and really get down to color and featureism, it's really about survivability, which is so sad. And it should never be that. We're looking at the same challenges that when I talk to my grandma, she tells me this is the same thing that's been going on. Ain't nothing really changed, you know? They just got better at hiding it. Even with social media. So yeah, I need systemic change. I need less old people who don't care about me. And we need more civic engagement. We need to do better. This is terrible.
Hey, the final thing I guess I would say is we need to remember where police forces came from originally. They were slave patrols, y'all. They hunted down runaway slaves and brought them back to the plantation. Now, when that's your origin point, it makes sense. That's what we still do.
Wow.
We pay millions and millions of dollars to hunt down Black and brown, mostly men, and bring them back to the plantation, which is mass incarceration.
Wow.
That's the new plantation, y'all. Didn't you know? If
he said it. Yusuf said it. Yusuf Salam.
Incarcerated, and guess what you get to do for $1 a day? You make license plates and jeans, and you do all kind of state work for less than minimum wage. It's the plantation, y'all. It's just called mass incarceration. So we have to find a way to get our young men and women directed into the path of their purpose and away from addiction, away from incarceration. And we got to start early. We got to let them know they're loved. We got to help folks get assets and wealth and financial security so their babies have what they need and don't have to steal it out of the Walmart. We got work to do. And IBJ
We got work to do
and jump right on into that mess.
100%.
Goodbye, slave patrols.
Exactly. And see, it's good that you hit on that. I promise we'll be wrapping it up soon, but it's too important not to talk about. The system is not like functioning any way other than it's supposed to. It started out this way and it's going to continue to be this way. I know one thing about systemic change that people talk about is not enough to change the system if it's built to be bad. But one thing I do believe is we got to remember a system starts with the people. And that's why grassroots activism can be done through voting. And that's why we stress it so much on this podcast, is because as people being the voice and getting into representation, becoming representatives, being a part of that oversight group that can oversee the police and getting the right people in place, that's where we can convert and change the system into something that serves us and doesn't murder us. So thank you so much for Miss Carol for bringing that up, and for Kalia for asking the questions today, and for Morgan just for facilitating everything. As always, everybody, please, please, please protect your peace, stay safe, stay you, stay real, and please come to the IBJ podcast in the next 2 weeks. Love you all. Thank you.